At 882 feet long and 175 feet high, the Titanic was the largest moving object ever built at the time. It featured first-class dining halls, grand staircases, Turkish baths, and even a squash court. The first-class passengers, including famous names like John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus, enjoyed 10-course meals, elegant parties, and the height of luxury. Second-class passengers traveled in comfort far beyond most other ships, while third class, though simpler, was still better than most other ocean liners of its time. People from all walks of life, business magnates, musicians, servants, and hopeful emigrants, shared the same ship. Despite her luxury, the Titanic was not adequately prepared for disaster. She carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for barely half the people aboard. It was believed she didn't need more. After all, Titanic was unsinkable, or so they thought. As the ship pressed forward across the Atlantic, it received several warnings from other vessels about icebergs ahead. At least 6 separate messages came through, warning of a dangerous ice field in Titanic's path. But these warnings went largely ignored. At 11:40 p.m., the 2 lookouts in the crow's nest suddenly saw a dark mass directly ahead, an iceberg standing 100 feet tall. "Iceberg, right ahead!" one of them shouted, ringing the warning bell. First Officer William Murdoch reacted instantly, ordering the ship to turn hard left while reversing the engines. But it was too late. Titanic scraped along the iceberg's side, sending a shudder through the ship. To the passengers above deck, the impact seemed mild, barely more than a jolt. But below deck, a catastrophe was unfolding. The iceberg had torn open multiple compartments, allowing water to flood in. The ship's chief designer, Thomas Andrews, was among the first to understand the gravity of the situation. After assessing the damage, he turned pale. The ship has less than 2 hours to live. Titanic was going to sink. As the freezing water surged into the lower decks, the reality of the disaster set in. Passengers scrambled for lifeboats, but there weren't enough for everyone. Women and children were ordered to board first, but chaos quickly followed. First-class passengers were escorted to safety, while many third-class passengers found themselves trapped behind locked gates, struggling to escape. Some crew members fired warning shots to control the crowd. Benjamin Guggenheim, a wealthy businessman dressed in his finest suit, and calmly accepted his fate. "We are prepared to go down like gentlemen," he said. Others weren't as composed. As lifeboats filled and launched, some men tried sneaking aboard, disguising themselves as women. At 2:10 a.m., Titanic's bow was completely submerged. The stern rose into the air, nearly vertical. The ship began snapping in half, sending passengers and debris flying into the freezing water. Those in the ocean faced an even worse fate. The water was -2 degrees Celsius, 28 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill a person in minutes. As the ship disappeared beneath the surface, the ocean was filled with screams of those struggling in the water. But soon those screams faded into an eerie silence. Over 1,500 people perished. The RMS Carpathia, after receiving Titanic's distress call, rushed to the scene, arriving around 4 a.m. The 705 survivors, mainly those who had made it onto lifeboats, were pulled aboard. They had lost family, friends, and everything they owned. Among those who perished were Captain Edward Smith, ship designer Thomas Andrews, and John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in the world. One of the most heartbreaking stories was that of Isidor and Ida Straus, owners of Macy's department store. They had a seat on a lifeboat, but Isidor refused, saying, "I will not go before other men." Ida, unwilling to leave her husband, stepped off the boat and told him, "We have been together all these years. Where you go, I go." They perished together. The Titanic disaster shocked the world. Investigations followed, and major changes were made to maritime laws. Lifeboat regulations were updated. Ships now had to carry enough lifeboats for everyone aboard. 24-hour radio watch became mandatory, ensuring distress signals were always heard. The International Ice Patrol was formed, monitoring iceberg movements to prevent another disaster. Over a century later, the Titanic remains one of the most famous tragedies in history. In 1985, the wreck was discovered, lying 13,000 feet below the ocean's surface. Over the years, scientists, divers, and filmmakers have explored the remains, uncovering relics and stories long lost to the sea. Though the ship has been claimed by rust and time, her story lives on. The Titanic is no longer just a ship. She is a legend, a symbol of human ambition and tragedy, and a reminder of how fragile even the mightiest creations can be. Thanks for watching. If you like this story, make sure to subscribe.